So I'm telling you the story about my dad, and when I was younger, he got his saxophone. So he played saxophone. I was in the marching band when I was in high school. My dad was also in the marching band when he was in high school. So the two of us were, well, he was one of the marching Bulldogs down in Waterloo, and I was actually part of the marching K-Hawks in Collinsville. And we're from two different time periods. I mean, he's 25 years older than me, but. But he's the reason I started in the band program, which just felt like one minor cascade after another, like dominoes. Like if you've seen Meet the Robinsons, and you remember that scene where they have the dominoes, it's like this huge, it's like 3 or 4 rooms full of dominoes, and they've got this huge thing. That's what life is like. It's a great butterfly effect. I mean, to make a domino analogy is the same as saying that the butterfly effect. You know, like a big, huge hurricane comes in, smash, destroys thousands of homes. People are homeless, you know, insurance money and mold damage. And a humongous, gigantic tsunami, hurricane, you know, whether it happens or doesn't happen, it probably has, it's the butterfly effect. I mean, a butterfly, how much actual force is being put off by those wings? It's not much, you know. But little things add up. It's the little things that make the biggest difference. It's the little things that'll make or break your marriage, that'll make or break your life. It's the little things. So you got to be careful with the little things. You got to be auspicious with the little things. My dad, right, plays the saxophone in high school, so I started playing the saxophone in high school. Well, one thing leads to another, and I've got myself a nice open career path as a musician, and I decided to not study music in school, like beyond high school. And this is sort of, I mean, it's not like I was afraid of anything necessarily, but I was thinking to myself, like, what if I start to study this music like it was a career, and then I don't like it as much? Like, music was something that I really liked, and I did it in high school, not because I had to, but because I liked to. And I was sort of cautious that if I studied it in college, then I wouldn't enjoy it very much. It would become an occupation, it would become a job, and it would become tedious. It would become something that's a lot less fun, you know, that's a lot less joyful. And so I always wanted it to be sort of like a hobby, sort of something, you know, I've got my regular whatever I'm doing for my basic income, and then I've also got, you know, maybe a drum set in the basement, maybe a guitar, maybe a piano, maybe a saxophone, just laying around. And maybe I pick them up and play them just for fun, but why I would want to turn that into an occupation, I mean, a lot of people try and make it in the music industry. It's pretty difficult. I mean, it's not impossible. There's lots of people, for example, that get on with like the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra is a really big, I've seen them perform a few times. I think they do like a free concert once a year. They used to. I don't know if they still will with the COVID and everything, but they used to do a free concert once a year in Forest Park. I love going to that. It's one of my favorite. In fact, 5.5 years ago, I was in my last relationship, was actually there. It was at the Art Hill, right outside of the art museum. Really amazing, talented people, let me tell you. So it's not impossible to make it in that sort of an orchestral or contemporary music sort of way. I just didn't think I would enjoy it as much. I wanted to do something else, something different. I mean, originally I was thinking like maybe being an engineer would be cool, but that had to do partly with my parents. And my mom told me when I was younger, she was like, hey, you know, if you're You're an engineer. She works in an engineering firm. My mom does. She works in an engineering firm, but she's not an engineer herself. And so by contrast, she knows that engineers, typically you're kind of like making a little bit more than the other occupations within the firm. Partly because there's more responsibility, there's more liability, etc. But it, maybe requires more skill, more training. So that had been something I had thought about for a while, but never really understood why I thought about it, Well, I eventually got online, and one of my family members, a friend of my dad's, actually had convinced me to start this YouTube channel, where on this YouTube channel, a guy named Ty Lopez. And so I've got a huge influence several years, like 6 years ago, give or take, 7 years ago, I guess, about 7 years ago, give or take, about 7 years ago, is when I started following this guy named Ty Lopez, which I don't think he'd been on social media that long before I started following. Of course, he's pretty big now. Actually convinced me to start, and he was giving some ideas about like whether you should go to college or not. And at that point, I was like planning on enrolling, but I didn't really have the same drive that I used to. Like high school, in the middle of high school, you're talking junior year. College seems like, okay, that's obviously what goes next, Senior year rolls around, and I actually took 1 year off between high school graduation and starting college. I took 1 year off, and it was rolling around to be that time, and I was sort of getting less and less enthusiastic about it the whole time. Just getting less and less enthusiastic the whole time. But I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't know what was up next. Now I know what's up next. So I enrolled like I had planned on it, and I was sort of, it wasn't like an enrollment that I was wanting to stay enrolled forever. And it wasn't an enrollment that I was like, oh, college is the answer, it's the solution for all my problems. But I didn't have anything else better to do, and it seemed like a bias towards action. That's something that Ty Lopez talks about, having a bias towards action. And since I didn't have anything else to do at that time, I was like, why not go ahead and enroll? So I took a couple classes. I started this, and I was actually in the drum, which was cool. They had a Drumline at SIU Edwardsville, which I was there for about a year, and 1 year, a little bit less. I didn't quite finish the last semester. They had this Drumline program at SIU Edwardsville. It was the first year, and I enjoyed it because I was in the Drumline in high school. You've got to pay, which is the thing, you've got to pay. There's like fees, so many $100 every couple months or whatever. There's fees for all the competitions to go in, the concessions, and the you wear these fancy suits and everything, and the fancy hats and the fancy shoes, and it's all real fancied up where they do good competitions, and it's high class. I mean, the competitions, we won a couple of gold medals, and those are very difficult to attain. Like, there are competitors from all over the place, man. We went to we went on some long drives. I mean, one time we went out and performed in Washington, D.C. One time we went out and performed in Ohio. One time we went out and performed in, like, Kentucky. We were all over the country, okay? And we were a big freaking deal. And I was part of the leadership corps, but you had to pay money in high school. But in college at SIU Edwardsville with this Drumline, they paid you. So it was like a student job, sort of. They've got certain student jobs where you've got to have less than 20 hours for it to be a student job. And I had another student job, which was actually the SIU ITS. I worked for the Information Technology Services, and I was a admin, telecom network admin assistant. And so they basically, on my paycheck, it was the same. Like, what I did with the network people at the ITS was sort of more like work, but like I got paid the same way from them as I did from the Drumline. And pretty much everybody else in the Drumline didn't have an on-campus job, so when they were in the Drumline, they got the money from the Drumline, and that was all. They didn't get the money from anywhere else, but it wasn't much. It was like $25. Like we had practice a couple nights a week. We had a game like once every other week or once a week or so, and it was like $20 or $25. So we had this sectional practice one time, which there's different types of drum. There's bass drum, snare drum, tenor drum, and cymbals, and there's different types of instruments and everything. So sometimes we all practice would all practice together. Sometimes we would split up. And so when we're split up, they call it sectionals. And so this was a sectional practice with all of the snare drums, because I was in the snare drums that year. And it was a sectional practice with these two people. There was only two other snare players that year. So it was me, and then it was Craig, and I think Taylor was her name. Maybe not. So anyway, Craig was this guy that had been to drum corps. So drum corps is this big deal, because it's kind of like the super elite of marching band. Like in marching band, things are kind of high class, kind of not, and there's still lots of competition and so forth, but drum corps is the next level. It's a step and beyond. You can do some videos online between like the difference between drum corps and marching band. It's a huge, humongous difference. If you tap up the drum corps, the things they do, it's like it blows your mind. If you just spend 5 minutes listening to like the Blue Devils drum corps or the Cavaliers drum corps, it blows your mind, the sort of things that they're capable of achieving. The thing is, it's an age-out sort of activity. You can only do it up to the age of 21. Once you turn 22, you're unable to be in the drum corps. So it's still sort of a youthful activity. It's not like a lifelong activity, like being in the symphony or something. You can do that till you retire, till you're 60, 70 years old. But, you know, you can't do that with a drum and bugle corps. Anyway, needless to say, this guy Craig had been in the drum and bugle corps. I had not. I had been to an audition one time. I didn't make the audition. I didn't really try that hard. Maybe I could have made the audition if I tried a lot harder. Some of the music is tough, man. Those guys are so amazing at what they do. But this other guy, Craig, he had chops, and chops is basically, you know, saying the skill level, and you've got to develop the muscles in a certain way because of using the rebound of the drum. Think of like a drum head being like, I mean, we were talking about vibrations in the last video and how my dad's saxophone, the vibrations come from a little piece of wood in the reed, and that vibration, but of course for percussion instruments, the vibration comes from the vibration of the drum head. And so the drum head gets stretched out, sort of like a canvas, sort of like a painter takes a canvas and stretches it all out. The same thing happens with a drum, and it creates a vibration, sort of like a trampoline. So you can think about the drumstick being sort of like a trampoline. And you've got to be able to use the buoyancy and the bounciness of the trampoline drum head. Anyway, they call it chops, and this guy Craig had way better chops than me. I didn't have any chops compared to him. I mean, I had chops. I was better than Taylor, but I wasn't quite as good as Craig. And anyway, she had to leave early. She had to pick up somebody from practice, and so she left like right after sectionals got out. I was kind of taking my time, just talking the breeze with this guy Craig, because I thought he was pretty cool, and I thought I could learn a lot from him. And so we were joking about how we got paid for being in these games. We'd played a couple games already, girls games, boys games. We'd played both games already in basketball for the SIU Cougars. I think this guy Sean was running it back in the day. Not sure if he... Back in the day, it was this guy Sean, but... Well, anyway, Taylor had split out. I'm talking the breeze with Craig. I'm talking about how they pay us money, and I thought it was kind of cool. And he told me about this opportunity where he made... It's sort of funny because it's sort of like the reason that I left college. It had to do a lot with Ty Lopez, and it had to do a lot with Craig, the drumline guy. So it had to do a lot with both of them. It had to do with Ty Lopez and Craig, the drumline guy, both. And that's why I decided to pursue other career opportunities. And largely, they fit together so like 100% because Ty Lopez had done this video about, do you want to go to college, do you want to not? He's like, some things you really need to go to college. Like if you want to be a doctor, there's laws, there's regulations, you've got to have the training. You've got to go to school. There are other things that are sort of like school's not the best thing for. Like if you want to be a translator, if you want to like go, you know, and learn these other languages. Heck, if you're in America and you're trying to learn some other language at a university, how much are you actually going to learn? You'd be better off taking your 10, 20,000 a year and just living in another country, because you would learn the language so much faster and so much more effectively. So there's some things that college is really great for, and there's some things that college is not the best for. And I already had all of that in mind, and even before I learned about Tai Lopez, I'd been on Instagram watching all of these Instagram like Millionaire Mindset and How to Get Your Head Right, and one of my favorites of all time was No More, Say Less. And I've taken that to heart so much. It defines who I am in a large way. I know so much, but I say so little. Like, the reason I started doing this YouTube channel and the reason I started writing my book, which I'll probably tell you about in a later video, is that it sort of became a little painful for me to live life, because I realized that I was so far dissociated from the average people, from the 98% of Americans, the average people, you know. And I'm so far different from them, and it sort of became difficult to live life because I was so far different from them. Because I had so much more wisdom, knowledge, intellect than they had, it sort of dissociated me and put this huge, great wall, this huge barrier between us. And so I'm like striving to still be like a regular person and have a regular life and, you know, have a beautiful family. Be sort of normal, fit sort of in. So this guy Craig, the Drumline guy, who's got these massive chops, right, on the snare drum, and he's telling me about how about a year ago or during the last summer break that he had this summer job. That his summer job, what they did, what he did, he said he made $500. He showed up at like noon. It was a convention center. A huge convention center with these, you know, tables and booths all set up, people walking in and out, you know, huge convention center. He said he showed up at like 11:30 or so and worked from like 12 to 5 or 12 to 4 or so, and he said he made $500. And so I was floored. I was blown away. I was like, how did you make like $100 an hour? How did you make like $500 on one freaking day? That's really sweet. And that's what started everything. That's why I left college. Because how many people, you know, graduate from college, they're earning $500 a day? Honestly, how many people? You know what I mean? How many people? You work 5 days a week, there's $2,500 a week, $2,600 a week. How many people graduate from, you know what I mean? Like engineers and computer science majors, they're making, you know, $1,400, $1,500 a week, $1,600 a week. It's really not that much compared to, so anyway, that I like to look back on my path sometimes, and I know that everything I've done has been the best choice because life is unfolding just right. I mean, everything's lined up, everything's in order. It's the dominoes. It's the butterfly effect. It's the butterfly, it's the dominoes, everything's lining up. Everything's in alignment. And the reason I'm bringing this up is to get you back to the story about my library brain. One of my favorite topics of all time is something called epigenetics. But before I can get to that, I would have to tell you again about Tai Lopez, because he used to do these videos. I think he still does, I don't know. But he called them like book reviews. And so for several years ago, he did his book review on this guy named Dave Asprey. And this guy named Dave Asprey who published the Bulletproof Diet. Now since then, I became a huge Dave Asprey fan too. So I'm this huge Dave Asprey fan of the Bulletproof Diet. He's written a couple other books called Headstrong, and his wife Lana wrote a book called The Better Baby Book, which was sort of like my introduction to epigenetics. Okay? And so I got that book, even though here I am 5-6 years later, still not even dating somebody, much less ready to have a child with somebody. But I still have this book about how to have a better... Well, anyway, it got me thinking about like what sort of person... And the most remarkable thing is that like the 6 months prior to conception of the child is what determines the child's wherewithal determines their health physically when they're 50 years old. When they're 45 years old, how healthy they are and the sort of life that they're living is largely determined on, you know, a man's sperm and a woman's egg being extraordinarily fertile for such a period of time and so forth.